Hello, welcome, and thank you for joining us this Friday afternoon for our second IWF Reads Book Club meetup. I'm your host today, Kelsey Bolar, and with me are two of my colleagues from Independent Women's Forum, Ashley MacLeay and Hadley Manning. Together, along with the more than 200 of you who registered to join us today, we're going to be discussing this month's read, Finding the Bright Side, The Art of Chasing What Matters by Fox News host Shannon Bream. In moments, Shannon Bream is going to be here herself to discuss with us. But first, I'm going to quickly hand it over to Ashley, who's going to share a bit about this virtual event platform that we're using today, so you know how to engage and up here on video if you want to participate in today's discussion.
Hi everyone, I'm Ashley, and very quickly I want to give you some information on how this platform works. You'll notice there's a chat room in the chat tab in the upper right-hand corner. If you do not see the chat field, you can select the caret in the top right-hand corner to open the chat window. We encourage you to join the discussion in the chat, but please be respectful of others. Please assume that everyone has good intentions, and remember that foul language is prohibited. When Shannon Bream joins us, she wants to hear from you. We want that right next to the chat room tab, there's a questions tab. If you have a question for Shannon, please post it in the questions tab. And that's where we'll ensure that we see your question. It's the best place to post it, so we don't miss it. After Shannon signs off around 3:30, we're going to continue the discussion amongst ourselves. At this point, we'll ask some of you to join us up here on stage and ask your question on video, live. If you want to do this, please leave a capital V, that's a capital V for video, to the end of your question to signal that you want to come up on video. We'll remind you of this once Shannon signs off. For those joining via phone or tablet, unfortunately, if you have a poor connection, please note that we won't be able to put you on video. We'll also be posting live polls in the polls tab. Make sure you respond. And towards the end of our discussion, we'll be drawing and announcing names for 3 autographed copies of Finding the Bright Side as our door prize today for our book club members. But you must be present to win and get the drawing and get one. So don't miss your chance. With that, I'm going to bring it over back to you, Kelsey.
Well, without further ado, let's all welcome Shannon Bream to the stage, our virtual stage platform here today. I have to note, it's definitely not a busy news day today. So, I'm sure Shannon has a lot of free time. I think that makes us especially grateful for her taking 30 minutes to chat about her book with us today, and perhaps maybe even a few current events. Shannon, hello, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I'm honored, and it's so fun to see where everybody is tuning in from all over the country. And thank you for making me part of this event. I'll share a few remarks, and then I'm happy to take questions. A lot of folks asked about the book, where it came from and how it got started. And I've been approached by a couple of publishers about doing a book. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do something serious on like the history of the Supreme Court or key cases or the fight over religious freedom, things that I cover a lot. And they're like, no, that's super boring. Don't do that. They said, you've been writing these stories on Facebook and telling stories that people really respond to. And we just want you to share what it's like, how you got to this point in your life, the good and the bad, what it's like behind the scenes to interview the president or work at the Supreme Court. And to work at Fox and all those things. And actually, one of the stories that started this whole thing off on Facebook was about my wedding ring, which I lost for 6 months. And I wrote the story about how I found it. There's so many people on Facebook that wrote, I lost my ring too. And either they did find it or they didn't find it, or the crazy place they ended up finding it. But it was a bigger picture for me of just how, I was so heartbroken over losing this thing that is not worth a ton of money. It's a simple gold band, but it was the sentimental part behind it. And so connecting with so many people about how they felt about their weddings and their rings and things that they'd lost that meant something to them over time, there was just a real response from people that, the publisher said, you should write more of these stories. And that's kind of how the book came together. I said to them, my faith is central to my life. I want to be able to include that in the book. And so it's woven through there, I hope, in a way that's very conversational for people. but just to say how it sustained me through really the worst times. And I thought it was important too to be transparent in the book, because I think sometimes when you work in television, or you have, your Instagram perfectly edited and curated, and people think, oh my gosh, your life is so together and wonderful. And not that there aren't so many blessings and great things, but I thought it was important to be honest too about some really dark struggles that we've gone through, my husband and I. And that seemed to be what connected with people the most who've read the book, because I think we all have been there, or we will be there, or we're there now. So just being able to sort of throw a lifeline to people to say, yeah, we've all been in really dark, hard places, but there is even hope and there's purpose in the midst of that. So along with that, try to share some funny stories. I'm not afraid of embarrassing myself, which if you've had a chance to read the book, you know that. So I really just hoped it would be encouraging to people. That's the bottom line. And so I hope it has been. And I'm honored that you guys chose the book to have a conversation about. So thanks for having me.
Well, I know I personally enjoyed reading it. I read it right away when it came out, and I've had the privilege of chatting with you about it before. So I'm going to toss it over to Hadley to ask our first question. And in the meantime, for all of our audience listening, please leave your questions in the question tab on the right, and we'll ask them to Shannon for you.
Hi, Shannon. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. And hello,
Thanks, Hadley.
Everybody in the chat room. I see several people from Colorado. That's where I'm broadcasting from today. I live in Denver. It's very sunny here. It's easy to see the bright side when the sun is shining, but like a lot of people during this pandemic, I've been looking for the bright side in that, and that's what made your book such a good, timely read. So my first question for you is, what would you say is the bright side of this kind of dark time our country's going through?
Everybody's had such a different experience, and my friends who are busy trying to work from home and homeschool 3 or 4 kids and try to keep it together. I mean, there's been such a stress level and so many emotions and roller coasters for people. I've had several neighbors who have had COVID and so far have recovered from that, but we've had friends and family who haven't, who have lost people. And so I think this is like a tidal wave that just hit the world with very little warning or full understanding of. So I think we have to give ourselves a lot of room to just process emotions and deal with the enormous stress and struggles a lot of people are finding at home right now, exacerbating whatever other issues you may have been struggling with in your life. I mean, this is just sort of the granddaddy on top of all of them. So I've tried to be very mindful about friends who are struggling and already had very emotional things going on in their lives. And all of us have been there. I've cried in the shower a few times. I've driven around in my car with Def Leppard turned up. I mean, whatever it takes to kind of get your emotions out and move on to the next step. We all have different ways of dealing with it. But the truth is, I've seen so many good things, and I've heard a lot of people, even those who are really struggling, talk about the good things that have come. Neighbors that we are all kind of know each other, but to really look out for each other, to check in and say, especially with our older neighbors, can we run an errand for you? Can we go to the grocery? And they're super offended, like, no, I'm not that old. I'm fine. And I can take care of myself. But sharing baked goods, contact-free deliveries just onto each other's doorsteps. Really, even if you're standing across the yard talking to people, really having time to do that, to have time to talk with family. For me, I'm working from home. I feel super, super blessed that I've got a guest room that's now turned into a TV studio. So that's been really helpful to feel, safe and to be here at home. But I've gotten to spend a lot more time with my husband, which is great because a lot of the times I get up, I do a lot of reading in the morning. I put out a note to my team, have a little downtime during the middle of the day, but then I'm into work usually by 3 and starting meetings and I'm running around. And I find that it's just been, even though there are different pressures to try to work remotely, it's really forced me to slow down, to cut out a lot of the busy stuff that I felt was taking up the day versus just doing the things that are really important. So it's been a good reset, not letting the urgent crowd out the important, and just having more times for conversation and relationship with neighbors and looking for ways to help other people. I think we end up getting more out of that, I hate to say, a lot of times than the person that we're trying to serve or to help. So I think that there are good things that I hope will last beyond this. There are so many things that we need to change. People need their jobs back and their health back, and to get rid of fear and to be able to return to some kind of normalcy. But in the meantime, I do hope that there are some positive things that will stick around.
I really I really appreciate that, Shannon, especially because I'm a parent and have experienced those roller coaster of emotions as well. But like you said, you can really connect, slow down, and connect with your community during this time. So that really is the bright side. I'm going to switch it over a little bit to the book, and as a recovering lawyer, I really found it interesting that you discussed your transition from law to journalism. And it was refreshing to hear that it didn't come easy to you, and that it took a lot of hard work and sacrifice. Could you elaborate a little bit for our viewers and on how you knew about making that jump, how it was the right choice for you? And it would be great if you could share some advice for others who might be considering a major change in their own career.
Yeah, I love that question because I get that a lot. People are very nervous. They think whatever they majored in college, they have to stick to that. Whatever that first job is, they're now on the path and they can't deviate. And I felt that way coming out of law school and starting in a private practice with a group in Florida and thinking, okay, this is my fate. I'd always been a current events and news junkie. I didn't know about pursuing it really as a career. I talk about my dad, who was very tough, but filled with love. And he did say to me, you're going to law school or medical school, so pick one. And I don't want to hear about any guys or dating or engagements till you get through one of those. And I know he meant the best for me. And I was a very independent young woman. And I did want to make sure that I had a career where I could take care of myself and not be dependent financially on anyone else. So law school made sense, but it wasn't my passion. And I tried to stick with it for a few years. But those Sunday nights got harder and harder where I knew I was back to the grind Monday morning for another long week. The difference I find now being in media is that I truly love what I do. It's a passion and I don't count the hours. I probably work as much, if not more, than I did as a lawyer, but I love what I'm doing and I feel very blessed and grateful every day to get to do this job. But yeah, I had a really weird transition out of law into news. I juggled both for a little while. And I joke about the world's oldest intern because I was, pushing 30 when I decided I was going to make this, that was my midlife crisis and do this change. And I, interned at a local affiliate, ABC affiliate in Tampa, and I hid it from my law firm. So I would do that like overnights and weekends when I could. And I just kind of forced my way in the door every time somebody was telling me no. I kept, bugging my boss there at the station. And I finally went to him and said, hey, I've told my firm I'm leaving. I'm going to pursue broadcast journalism. And he's like, we have not offered you a job. There's nothing here. And I said, yeah, but I'm stepping out on faith. I mean, I really had prayed about it. I talked to mentors and people that I trusted. My husband and I made the decision together because financially, obviously, it was a big impact on both of us together. And I felt confident about what I was doing. And the first job I took was 2 a.m. to 11 a.m. at the station. It was not glamorous. I was making coffee and answering phones. I left my law firm and my expense account lunches and all that good stuff behind, but I was so happy. And that to me was the sign I was on the right path to take a pay cut and be working these horrible hours that my family and friends didn't understand, but loving every minute of it. I ran the teleprompter for the morning anchors on the morning show. I started writing for the morning show, and I would just pick up whatever they would let me do until one day, finally, my boss had left a memo in my box, and he said, listen, if everybody's occupied, if everyone has broken legs and there's breaking news and no one can go, but you're sitting here as a human body, we may send you. So that occasionally started happening, and I loved it. I'm sure I was terrible, and I had a lot to learn, but I would watch my tapes every Friday if I'd had any live reports that week and take notes about where I could get better. And I was really working at it. And as you know, if you've read the book, my boss and his boss at the station both left at the same time in a big management change. And the new guy that came in came after a couple of weeks of being there on the job and called me in. The head of HR was sitting there, and I thought, I am getting promoted. Maybe I'm not an overnights anymore. But the head of HR is sitting there. That's never the case. And he basically told me, you're the worst person I've ever seen on TV. You will never make it in this business. And I hope you're a better lawyer than you are a reporter because you're really bad. And so there were some twists and turns on the way, but that was a real gut check for me. I learned a ton of humility through that. I also learned the lesson that your job cannot be your life. You can't find all your worth in it, but it made me fight for where I am today. There are a lot of twists and turns, as you know, in the book, and Britt Hume plays a big role there, and my husband. And like I said, I'm super grateful for what I get to do every day, but I did get punched in the stomach a few times on the way.
Well, I really appreciate that because, they say when you love what you'll do, you'll never work another day in your life.
Mm-hmm. That's been my experience.
And yeah, that's actually the perfect segue to the next question I want to ask, which came in from one of our book club members, a name I actually recognize. Her name's Chrissy, and she's a young aspiring journalist. I'd say, Chrissy, you're off to a very good start. But she said, the moment in your book that I relate the most to is when you were told you weren't good enough to be on air. Did you ever consider leaving the journalism industry when that happened? And if you didn't, what helped you push past that negative voice at the time?
Yeah, I did, because I thought, oh my goodness, I'm so new to this. I've left my legal career. Am I crazy? So there was a lot of doubt. There were months and months and months there of sending out tapes and cold calls and emails and resumes and getting crickets chirping. So there was a lot of doubt there. And I kept thinking, should I go back to being a lawyer? That's not exactly a terrible fallback position. But I really struggled, and I kept thinking, I can hang on for one more week. I can do this for one more week. And thank God my husband was so supportive, like, let's hang in there. I believe this is the right move. I believe that you were called to do this. This is your passion. This is where you want to go. So I definitely had moments of doubt. And I kind of am half joking when I say, as a person of faith, I knew there was purpose in this, and I'm praying, all right, Lord, I know there's a lesson. If you could just go ahead and drop it on me. Let's fast forward this thing and move ahead. But that's really not how you learn things, at least not for me. And I did learn a lot of lessons in that time. But, I spent a lot of time in prayer saying, listen, you got to open the door for me or show me that I was wrong to get on this path. And so my faith really sustained me. People like my husband, listen, at this point, even my family was like, what are you doing? So I'm not sure they were super supportive about it. But just believing that this passion that I had in my heart wasn't wrong, that I was on the right path, and that I would just have to keep banging on doors and bugging people until I got to the right place. And that eventually happened in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Charlotte, North Carolina. That's close to where I grew up. I grew up in Shelby, so I probably were on the air when I grew up in that area. I have another question from an audience member. This was part of the book that I found most fascinating. I am a mom. I do have 2 young children. It's a big responsibility. It's a big part of my life right now. But you open up in the book about how, like a lot of women, and this question's from Victoria Coley, thanks for the question, you've never felt the calling to be a mother. And I'm sure women, maybe women who are with us in the book club today, feel the same way. But we don't hear from those women very often. Why did you decide to share this publicly? And what can you say about your decision and how you came to terms with it?
Yeah, and I honestly think that it wasn't the hardest thing to write, because for me, writing about my husband's illness and my own illness, those were the toughest ones to go back and kind of relive. But this was the thing that was scariest for me to share, because I felt growing up, is there something wrong with me that I don't have this strong maternal drive, that I'm not playing with my baby dolls and wishing that I had a bunch of kids. And I used to feel like I was defective because I didn't have that desire in my heart. And I thought, well, I can't voice that. I can't talk about that because it doesn't fit a lot of people's narrative or role for a woman. And it sounds super selfish. And I just thought in a lot of ways, people are not going to get this. I should just keep it in my inside voice. But then I would occasionally meet other women along the way who said, for me, I just didn't feel called to it either. I know you have to be 100% committed to raising this precious life that you're given. And that has to be your focus. And you need to want that role. And so I've had some really awkward conversations about it, but I thought it was important to put in the book because I have met other women along the way. And many of them, you would recognize their names. These are public figures and private friends also, who just said, I didn't feel the call for that. And I felt a call to something else. And I know in my career, I have coworkers who manage it and juggle it and make it happen. And so many of you do too, having busy careers and having kids. I really do. For me, it just wasn't the path that I chose. I was very honest with my husband about that when we were dating and said, listen, we have a lot of friends with surprise babies. And if that came, we would embrace it and be excited and know that it was God's plan for us. And along the way, we have been able to have a lot of young people in our lives at times that have lived with us or depended on us financially. And we've had the freedom to be able to help them, get some of them through college and other tough times in their life. So we're grateful for the kids who've been in and out of our lives. But yeah, it's a conversation that I hadn't had a lot and was really pushed to include in the book. And I'm glad I did, because I think it's at least a conversation worth having for women of all ages.
That's really appreciative and open, that you're so open about being a parent. Going back a little bit to your work and the work that you do with the Supreme Court, in the book you talk about the Supreme Court, you talk about the running of the interns, and you talk a little bit about how it's changed with the pandemic around us. Mm-hmm. Obviously, there has been some change in the Supreme Court. SCOTUS heard its first oral arguments via conference call recently. Could you talk a little bit about the changes that have been happening with SCOTUS? And do you think that this change might be good, especially in the name of transparency?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has been so different. So I've been covering the court about 13 years now, and there are constantly requests that we put in, especially on a case that's really big, the same-sex marriage cases, big immigration cases, abortion cases. We always request same-day audio. It's very rare that they've ever said yes to us, but it's really helpful, and I think it helps people to understand the court a little bit more. I mean, the fact that C-SPAN has been able to, and all of us media outlets, have been able to host those arguments live the last few weeks so that people can hear for themselves. I think you really get to hear the justices' personalities and their viewpoints and their style. And I think it's important for people. But, you know, the Chief Justice has always said they won't have cameras unless they all agree on it. Now, about the audio, I don't know. I think that people have really enjoyed it. I'm not sure that it will last beyond the pandemic. The court is very just old school in that way. And they haven't really been supportive of this kind of thing. I think that they worry about their words being taken out of context or played in a soundbite in a way that is not accurate to the conversation that was ongoing. A lot of times you listen, it's very wonky and it's section whatever of the US law code, whatever. So a lot of it, I think, wouldn't be super exciting for people, but I think to have a window into their personalities is really helpful and interesting. So I'm glad they've been doing it. They had no choice. We get updates every week on how they're doing health-wise and what the plan is moving forward. So I don't think we're going to have the running of the interns this year, which is sad because we love it. But the odd thing is that for me, covering the Supreme Court is an early morning thing, and I do a late night show. So to have a TV studio in my house, like Monday, we're going to get opinions. They don't tell you what you're getting. But I'll take off my jammies, throw on a little bit of hair and makeup, and go downstairs to the guest room and be waiting for opinions online at 10 o'clock. So it's definitely a different way of doing it. There's a big push. Senator Grassley and some others have put something out today saying, listen, the live feed of the audio has gone well. There haven't been problems. We really push the court and hope that the court will maintain that whenever they return to in-person arguments. But because the court does skew so much older, and there have been health concerns with several of the justices, I think they'll be some of the very last to return to business in the workplace, when in the past, there'd be times, you guys know, if DC is shut down with a massive snowstorm, I would still somehow have to get to the Supreme Court because they literally never canceled arguments in all the years that have been following them. So it's a new age. We'll see if that audio sticks around.
I'm looking forward to next week.
Yeah, it's going to be big.
All right, so time flies. We only have a couple more minutes to squeeze it in. Maybe two more questions. I saw two audience members asked about the book writing process, and if you have any advice for those who are feeling sort of like flustered or overwhelmed with the ideas flowing through their head and getting it onto paper. Did you have any takeaways you learned through the book writing process? I
found that deadlines are helpful. It was very good to have someone saying, like, we need this chunk by this time, we need this chunk by this time. And I'd never written a book. I don't know if I'll ever do it again. So I was a total newbie at this, and I know how hard and frustrating it can be to get that moving. For those who are working on it, bravo. My publisher had me write out a table of contents. So I at least had an organization, some chapter titles, knowing what we were going to cover, where we were going to go. And I didn't necessarily tackle them in order, but whatever I felt like, all right, this is flowing right now. This idea is flowing. Let me jump on that when we work on that chapter. So I didn't necessarily finish them in chronological order for the way they ended up in the book, but I would just go with whatever idea was sizzling. And my poor husband got dragged into this too, because I would sit there whenever I was working with a laptop on my lap saying, do you remember this conversation we have? Or what was your remembrance of that visit to the hospital, or this or that or the other? So I just forced myself to block out time when I could. For me, if I had like 30 minutes, that's not enough for me to get going on something. It would be like a Saturday or Sunday or both, where I would say, listen, I got 5 or 6 hours and I'm just going to pound out whatever I can. It may be terrible, but at least I have a skeleton there and I can go back to it and fix it. And I found that once I just didn't put the pressure on myself for it to be a perfect first write, that really helped, because when you can get ideas out and get things going on paper, you can always go back and fix, but it kind of jogs your juices and your memory and your thoughts, other things. If you just, sometimes I would stream of consciousness type for 2 or 3 hours, and at least it gave me something to work with. So I find I need large. Some people are great, like my husband with a cat nap, 15 minutes and he's feeling good. Me, I'm like, nope, I got to be able to take off the makeup, put on the jammies, go to bed for like an hour, or I'm just not doing the nap. And I felt the same way about writing. I don't know if that's helpful.
Oh, I'm the same way. I can't do 15-minute naps. Hadley, do you have any last quick questions we can squeeze in here?
I was going to ask a question, but I don't know that it's a quick one. Ask a question because as I was reading the book, one of the most compelling stories from my perspective was when Sheldon had this experience of being diagnosed with a tumor and having surgery in the midst of not having health insurance. And I thought, wow, that too is something from the book that's kind of timely, because we're struggling with the pandemic and many people are losing jobs. So I don't know if you could sort of speak to the healthcare system in the U.S. That's certainly not a quick question, but if you have, any advice for people who might be dealing with those kinds of anxieties right now.
Yeah, I'm happy to tackle that. The good thing is we were like 24 when this happened, so we were too young and crazy to know just how bad things could get, which is maybe good to have so much optimism and just like youthful exuberance about everything. I mean, it definitely shut down our whole world when he was diagnosed with a brain tumor. We were engaged and planning our wedding. He didn't have insurance. He had his favorite job he's ever had. He was working at Florida State University, where I went to law school and where I grew up, in the athletic department, and he loved it. He probably worked 100 hours a week and got paid for like 20 or 30, and he had no benefits, but he'd take that job back today, making like 10 bucks an hour or whatever. He loved it. But when he was diagnosed, I mean, one of the first things he had to do was get a CAT scan, and that just had to come out of pocket. And honestly, that was a good education for us, because even though we weren't married yet, we were in this together and kind of sharing the burden. And so he got on a payment plan, and it was something like, $50 a month or whatever we could do to just pay off that CAT scan. It took forever. But you think about people who don't have insurance, and it goes way beyond a CAT scan. It goes, surgeries and treatments and everything else. I mean, it's absolutely overwhelming. I mean, he was very blessed in that within months of his diagnosis, he got a new job that did have benefits, and he was upfront with them and said, listen, I'm going to have some serious issues. I got to have brain surgery and everything else. They wanted him for the job. And so that was an enormous blessing. But just having that small taste that we had of not having insurance, you realize how it absolutely can wipe you out very quickly if you have a major illness. There are so many options now, and there's such a debate on Capitol Hill about where we go with the infrastructure of the ACA. The GOP had said they would repeal it the minute they got power. They didn't, and there's been a lot of pressure on them to come up with another safety net or scaffolding or something else that would provide for people. So I think people are going to have to get very creative. I've also experienced socialized medicine, having been in another country when I got very sick and was hospitalized. So I can say that I would much rather be hospitalized, as I have been in the US, and be treated here. I think our doctors and nurses and hospitals are amazing and world-class, and that's why so many people come from around the world to get treatment here. But we do have to figure out a way to make it accessible for everyone and affordable for everyone in a way that doesn't turn it into universal healthcare, which most Americans, the polling says, are not for when you explain to them what it would be. Others say, listen, we have an obligation as a wealthy country to cover everyone. So I think that conversation has to continue, because we've experienced it in a very small way and realized just how tragic it can be economically when you're struggling with healthcare to try to preserve your life as well. Not easy.
Amen. Well, I know Hadley is leading the charge for IWF on that front, so you all can head to iwf.org to hear more of, learn more about Hadley's policy proposals on that front. But Shannon, I know you have a big show to plan for tonight. There's, a few news stories going on right now. I don't know how you're going to cover them all. It is Friday. As we're saying goodbye, we're just wondering, you have this awesome tradition on Fridays where I think you and your staff have these dance clubs and dance parties, I guess, and we wanted to know, are you still having them?
It's sad we have not been having them. We keep saying Friday night dance party is going to come back when we can finally all be in the studio and be back together. It may be months, I don't know. We're going to start the transition back in the next few weeks. But yes, Friday night dance party, you're all invited. Should you be in DC, let me know, come by the studio and you can join our dance party. It's 3 songs. We have one to get everybody there. The second one's pretty hype. Everyone gets to dance. The third one is what we call the get out song. So it's a little slower. We wind down and everybody goes home and enjoys their weekend. But you're all welcome to dance party.
Well, you sound like a very fun boss. I wouldn't mind working for you.
Come on by.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. Everyone else, stay tuned, but we're going to let Shannon go. I know everybody appreciates your kindness.
Thank you.
Today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Shannon.
All right, guys, we are still here for another half hour, and this is the part of the book club that we really want to hear and interact with you, not just talking about, not just asking questions, but perhaps sharing some comments, remarks, either anything you got from what we just heard from Shannon, or any comments, topics you want to talk about relating to the book. So leave that V for video next to your questions. If you're interested in actually being pulled up, we call this the remote on stage. If you want to pull up and ask your questions on video yourselves, we would love to hear from you. We'll give you a couple minutes to type those in. And in the meantime, Ashley, what did you take away from that conversation?
Well, it's interesting. I think that Shannon really gives some sage advice, not just today, but in the book as a whole. I really love that she talks about being underestimated and believing in yourself, and then being vulnerable. Vulnerability is a big theme, making sure that you can lean on others. And those are all 3 themes that I identified with myself, but also I think that those who are tuned in today can also take away, especially during this time. It was one of the best quotes that Shannon had in the book. I really enjoyed that. She said, he's given me, she's talking about her faith and pushing forward and God. And she says, he's given me the Garden of Eden, and I'm out here looking for a taco stand. And she talked a little bit about that today, that, you will find what you're passionate about, and really making sure that you find the bright side of what's going on with you today. So I'm really glad that she touched on several of these aspects. How about you guys?
I was just glad she was willing to answer my hardball question about the American healthcare system. She's got like 3 minutes left with us, and she's like, time for one last quick question. And of course, I bring in the elephant in the room and ask about something very complicated. But as always, she had a very nice answer. I think she's not only someone who's very articulate, but can really frame things well, and in a way that's objective and fair. And I've always admired people in the public sphere that I think also in their private lives and just personally are virtuous people and really live up to good moral values and can serve as sort of examples and models for people like me to follow, and for people that I can say to my young children, here's somebody who's been very successful. She's sort of proof that nice guys don't always finish last, because I think she's always, at least from all I can tell, she's been a person of integrity, and she's still had this great success in her career at Fox News and everything that she's done. I don't know if the folks watching at home could tell, but I think even Ashley, Kelsey, and I are a little starstruck to be in her presence. So it was really nice of her to join us.
Absolutely. I've had the privilege of going on her show a couple times. I always get super nervous because I'm such a big Shannon Bream fan and want to impress her. It's funny, you're going on national TV, but I'm like, no, I worry about what Shannon thinks of me. But I've always had a great experience. She is a straight shooter, which is hard to be in our media environment right now. And you know, one thing that stood out to me that I love, she's so open in talking about her decision, you know, not to be a parent. And three of us on stage right now are moms, and we know what a commitment that is. And I have so much respect for Shannon's willingness to talk about this, because I know before I had children, I did wonder how people, quote unquote, do it all at the same time, especially. You know, it's one thing if you have children and then go into, you know, a high power career later or so forth. And, you know, I think Shannon's very real about it. And of course, there are plenty of anchors who are moms as well, and they have figured out that balance. But sometimes when I feel like I'm being extra hard on myself, like I could be doing more, you know, I have to give myself some credit that I am raising a little human at home at the same time. So I'm very grateful she's open about that. And I do think it's something that as women, we could probably do a better job of talking about and be more inclusive of the women who, for whatever reason, decide, you know, by choice or not by choice, not to be a mom. I do want to make one programming note. In our emails, if you didn't catch it, we are giving away a couple signed copies of Shannon Bream's book. Ashley has it right there. We have a couple of those, and we are going to announce the winners for that at the end of the book club. This ends at 4 p.m. So you have to physically from your comforts of your home, still be here at the book. Yeah, we'll announce who it is, and then Ashley is going to send those books to our winners. We're super excited that Shannon did that for us.
Yeah, we'll say you have to virtually still be here.
Virtually still be here.
One thing I wanted to touch on, and this comes up in some of the questions, is about Shannon Bream, her positivity, her faith, and the things that keep her grounded. One thing she said today that really stood out to me was how she learned that her identity, I don't know that she used that word, but her worth is what she said, wasn't all wrapped up in who she was professionally. And at the same time, when she talked about her personal life and her personal choices, for example, the choice not to become a mom, she never seemed to come across as envious or jealous or regretful about some of the choices that she had made. And I feel like in our current environment, maybe it's precisely because so much of our lives are now online and we can easily compare ourselves to other people. We're comparing each other, moms and not moms, or moms who choose this style of parenting and moms who choose a different style of parenting. And it's a very easy thing to fall into, to say, well, the grass is greener. I mean, I found myself, I'll just be very confessional right now. As I was reading the book, I was thinking, oh gosh, well, maybe if I didn't have children, maybe I could be more successful like Shannon Bream. And that's a hard thing not to fall into, thinking that
I felt the same way. Yeah.
You know, what's refreshing about her is that she never says, you know, that she doesn't wish anyone else anything but success and happiness. And she doesn't seem to do a lot of comparing. In fact, even when she was eliminated from some of the pageants that she was in, she was framing it as, well, this was God's plan for me. This is what was ultimately in my best interest. And it wasn't about the prize to her. It was about the experience, the process, and the lessons that she could learn.
Yeah, I really appreciated that. I felt as I was reading it, I could be her friend and sit down and talk to her, that she was very non-judgmental of others. I really enjoyed that she talked about being a public figure and others judging her. And I think especially in today's world with Twitter, and we're hearing a lot about social media in today's virtual world, and she touched on the insults, especially women receive, whether you're as a public figure or with these days, we have so many women running for office, and the insults that women receive, whether it's their clothes, their appearance, their hair, how they're, you know, I really enjoyed that she talked about having a thick skin and knowing who she was first before letting herself out there, because in this business and in this day, you have to grow a thick skin. And we also, I think, we need to realize as women that we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to others, and we shouldn't let those who don't know about our work and who we are judge our worth. I really also enjoyed her part where she talked about the conventions and how other journalists and others who work with her stood up for her. And that I think that we as women should be standing up for each other, especially when you're doing good work, and recognize each other's worth. I really appreciated that portion of the book.
Well, it looks like you guys are being a little bit shy. I'm not seeing many people who want to volunteer to come on stage and join us in the discussion, but I am seeing some interesting comments. I love this, which Debbie pointed out in chapter 10. Shannon said, "Nothing is guaranteed and no job is ever going to love you back. Find your self-worth in what you do for finding your self-worth in what you do for a living is a dangerous thing." I think that speaks to all of the topics we've talked about today. Faith is first and foremost in Shannon's life, as it is in many of ours. But I think in today's culture, it's easy to get caught up in your work identity. There's so much pressure from very young ages to, get good grades, be a star athlete, go to a top school, and then get this high-powered career that really does define you. And it's really easy to get caught up on that and lose track of your faith or other aspects of your life that probably are more important. So I think it's really inspiring to see someone in Shannon's position to see that so clearly. It does not appear she's lost sight of that at any point throughout her career. Even when back in the day when she was doing pageants, I have to say, I'm from the Northeast. I'm originally from Connecticut. That's where I grew up. And pageants were not a thing for me there. I always thought pageant girls, it was almost like sororities. I thought I'm never going to be one of those girls. Of course, when I went to school, I ended up being a sorority girl. But Hadley or Ashley, did either of you grow up in the pageant world? Looking back now, given what I do in going on TV, it probably would have been very helpful training for me to have gone through that at a young age.
Hadley, I'll let you go first.
Oh, yeah. The very first beauty pageant that I entered when I was 3 years old, I won. And it was the Cleveland County Fair pageant in 1991. And I think that it disturbed my dad to see his little girl wearing makeup at like the age of 3. And he was like, "We're done with this. You're not doing any more pageants." And then later, when I was in high school, I did one scholarship program that really wasn't as pageant-esque. There was no swimsuit element. It was truly more of a scholarship competition. And this was in the Charlotte, North Carolina area, and it's the carousel program. And so I participated in that, and I didn't win, but I did get Miss Congeniality. So that was that to me was an even bigger prize, because that was the one thing that the other competitors, the delegates, could vote on. And speaking of voting, I did want to mention that we do have some polls for people to chime in on. And I was looking at some of the poll results that I thought were really interesting. One of the themes that we can't avoid when we talk to someone like Shannon Bream, who's in the media industry, is the question of trust. Specifically right now during the pandemic, I think it's been really difficult to navigate what is the correct information and who are trustworthy sources. And 65% of the folks who have chimed in on our poll today say no, they do not trust the news media to deliver straight news. 0% said yes. About 15% said not sure, and 20% said only Fox News. So I think that there is a trust gap among people. And I'd be curious if people want to chime in, even in the chat window, with some of the places that some of the public outlets or publications that you go to for information, I'd be so curious to hear, because I've been kind of re-examining my own media consumption recently and thinking about the biases that are out there and what, some of the best sources are. I try to read widely and sort of compare among different outlets what the different takes are, and sort of somewhere in the middle, I think maybe that's where the truth lies. But I'd be curious to hear from folks if you've got a favorite news source or sort of a strategy for how you consume information. That would be interesting to talk about. But I think that we're going to hear maybe from someone on our communications team soon.
Well, so I think Jody, I hear, is willing to come up. Let's see, Jody, we invited you on stage. Let us know if you get that invitation, if you want to accept it. Who's getting ready? Let's see.
I'm looking through the comments, and I really liked Debbie R. She was talking about, when we're talking about principles, she said one of her favorite portions of the book where she says, "No earthly goal or success is worth feeling like you sold your soul to get it." And Debbie, I appreciated that Shannon won't sell out against her principles. That was something that really struck a chord with me. So thank you, Debbie, for talking about that today, because it's something that I really found to be appreciative. Oh,
Hello.
Hello. Uh-oh, I got dogs barking. Can you hear me?
Thank you for having the bravery to come on.
We can hear you.
And my dogs, apparently.
And I see your dog mom like Shannon.
Of course. No, I was just commenting. I guess you're bringing me on for the comment that I had made, just seeing about, what did I say, being a straight shooter and standing for truth. I think it's just really such an admirable trait, because it just seems in this time that people have ulterior motives or are duplicitous, or they say things that people think that they want them to say, instead of really speaking from the heart and speaking from principles and from their values and staying true to those things despite pushback or nasty comments or being afraid. And that's something that I am trying to do more of as well, not to be so afraid to say some of the things that I say and worry about what other people say. So like I said, with Nikki Haley and with Shannon, I think it's inspiring and encouraging, and it's nice to see.
Well, it's really hard to do this in today's culture, and especially on social media. I imagine you maybe had some experiences there, and you have one bad experience, and then you're like, I'm never interacting on social media again. And then all you hear from on social media are people who think the same, and often it is people on the left. Have you had any experiences like that? And I don't know if you've been following any of the news with the President Trump's executive order on social media bias and censorship. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that, if that could help the situation at all.
I haven't had much pushback on social media because, quite frankly, I really try. I do repost some stuff on Twitter, and am more real on Twitter than I would be like on Instagram, for instance. I don't know why that is, but I also try not to contribute to anything nasty. I try to be very clear, because there's so much nastiness and so much negativity that I don't want to like something that's like that. I don't want to promote something like that. As far as President Trump's order, I don't know a whole lot about it. I'm not for censorship, period, in any way. I think people need to be free to say what they want to say. At the same time, it does seem like some of these social media platforms are restricting other people's opinions that seem to disagree with their own, and whose facts are facts. So, yeah. But I like the idea of keeping them in line, but I don't like the idea of censorship either. So I'm not sure where that line is. And I think part of what I had seen before is if you promote yourself as a public forum or you promote yourself as a publisher, there seems to be the different standards that they hold to. So.
Right, absolutely. And that's something that IWF as an organization is actually in the process of looking into right now, because we actually have faced some issues with specifically Twitter, kind of censoring our posts and sort of hiding them from people we know would usually be interacting with us. And it is problematic. It is unfair, especially when you have the CEO of Twitter going out and claiming to be a neutral platform. That's the big problem here. And as a conservative myself, I am not for empowering federal bureaucrats, many unelected, many of whom are far left themselves, to oversee something as big as social media platforms. But at the same time, it is not fair what's happening, and they are, especially in the last week, Twitter crossed a bright red line in doing these fact checks. They went from, sort of doing things secretly behind the scenes with their algorithms and so forth, to really putting it in front of all of us. You can't hide it anymore. They are taking editorial positions, and as you pointed out, fact checks are very very controversial. They were using CNN and Washington Post for their fact check, which I have to point out they actually had to correct because they were fact checking. They got absentee ballots and mail-in ballots confused. So I think they need to work on their fact checking skills a little bit before they do this. Well, thank you so much for your willingness to come on stage.
Yeah, thank you guys. This was awesome.
This was awesome interacting with you. We have Victoria now.
Thanks so much
Victoria.
for hosting today. I know Hadley's trying to get back on, and I just wanted to say, first of all, I had the great pleasure of working with Shannon at Fox News Channel during her new and early years with us, and she was always such a pleasure to work with. Always very pleasant and always welcoming to the kind of the younger, or I should say newer, kind of lower level employees there, which was always really great to see. So I think you can kind of tell that in her writing as well, she's just so personable and really caring, and that really comes across in her book. And I want to say, I see a lot of brand new names to IWF, and we're so excited to have so many new friends with us. And hopefully you guys will continue to follow us. I know Deborah just put in a really great question that I wanted to also bring up to you ladies. And I know Hadley is trying to respond to her in chat, but she is really impressed with the book club that you ladies have been putting on, and really encouraged by it. She is a mother of, let's see here, as a mother of 3 young adults, she says, ages 28 to 32. Your work as a mother is paramount to all other jobs. She wants to know from you all what degrees you guys have and why did you choose that?
Well, thank you very much, Deborah, for that question. And I see Hadley's back. Hi, Hadley. And I agree that being a mother has been a paramount to any other job, degree, or position I've ever held in my life. My son just turned 11 months yesterday, and it's been a pleasure watching him grow. But my degrees, I have a bachelor's in government and politics from the University of Maryland, and from there I also have a law degree. And I was a lawyer for several years, and I worked in election law, worked in securities law, and now I love what I do, working with policy and women at IWF. How about you guys?
Well, I responded to Deborah in the question. I went to the University of North Carolina. I have a degree in economics and journalism. And interestingly, UNC had a degree in public policy that I could have pursued, but I didn't anticipate working in public policy. So I guess I'm a little like Shannon Bream in that I studied one thing and I work in something, but it's related. Certainly, I put my economics degree to work. I enjoy going a little more in depth with policy analysis than simply as a reporter. And I think part of me underestimated how difficult the job of being a TV journalist would be. You know, you don't get to just look pretty and sit in front of a camera. You have to go track down the story. And sometimes that means putting a microphone in the face of somebody who's just lost their house to a hurricane. I mean, it is a very tough job, and you are working 24/7. I didn't think that that would really be the right kind of work-life balance for me either, because I always knew I wanted to prioritize my family and being a mom. And, you know, I agree that's my first and most important job. I didn't get to say this to Shannon earlier when she answered a question about this, but as a mom, I really appreciate now in my life those women who don't have children, who are friends of mine, who can be like our aunts and be like people who are helping our family, just to have another, you know, adult role model, and they can kind of help me out when I'm in a pinch. Some of my friends without kids are some of my biggest helpers. So everybody's got a role to play in terms of, you know, helping the next generation. It's not just people who have children themselves. So I appreciate that Shannon mentioned how she and Sheldon have been able to mentor, you know, young kids and play a role in their lives as well.
I know you guys are wrapping up. I'm going to ask one final question and then get off the stage. I'm just curious to know from her book, what is the one final takeaway you want all of our book club members to take from her book? What would be that? And then I'm going to say goodbye and have watch you until this ends. Thanks, ladies.
I guess
That's a big question. Go ahead, Ashley.
But, you know, I think finding the bright side, you know, you need to show positivity and find positivity in everything that you do. You can find the bright side, whether it's you're having a crummy day or you're having a crummy year. I know 2020 hasn't been the best for a lot of people, but there have been a lot of silver linings through this. And like Shannon said, we've become more connected, even if we're far away.
Yeah, I would say Shannon is so humble and hardworking, and I have always admired her for that. As I mentioned, I've had the privilege of going on her show a couple times, and since we're both out of Washington, D.C., sometimes I run into her in the green room, even when I'm not there for her show, and she always takes the time to say hi and just seems so supportive of me throughout my career, really for no reason other than I think she really does try to help young women in this industry succeed, and she gives us a chance. I mean, she booked me on her show before a lot of other hosts took a chance on me, and I'm so grateful for that. And she, you know, the person you heard from today is the person who Shannon Bream is. She just always has a smile on her face, and she is always looking for the bright side. I didn't realize right before she launched her show that she was having such a major health crisis with her eye. You would have never known interacting with her. She is so tough. And for that, I am eternally inspired by her, and I am grateful for her kindness. And if I can pass that on to other women who are pursuing a journalism career, that is what I hope to do. I've really
my one takeaway for me was that Shannon Bream defies stereotypes. She doesn't let other people define her. She kind of breaks the mold. I think there's unfortunately this stereotype that if you're a pageant woman or if you are glamorous TV host that you're not as thoughtful or not as intelligent. But boy, she blows that out of the water. She's always very articulate and very thoughtful, very, you know, high intellect, high caliber woman. And she is, you know, she comes from a conservative religious background. She's also, you know, decided not to be a mother. So she didn't, you know, she certainly hasn't allowed any pressure to conform to any particular stereotype really define her. And that's one of the things we try to champion at IWF, is that women come in all shapes and sizes, and we come in all different intellectual capacities and all different preferences and all different, you know, dreams and aspirations for our lives. And so that's one reason I'm so pleased to work with our organization, is because it gives us an opportunity to say, you know, there is no such thing as that cookie cutter woman out there. And Shannon Bream, certainly no cookie cutter.
No, she isn't. Well,
absolutely.
I think we have just done the drawing for our winners today for our book. And I wanted to, but while we are still on, while we have 2 more minutes, we are random drawing today. Our winners, congratulations to Catherine Dore, Mary Waller, and Angela Andrews. You guys, I will be connecting with you later offline to get your address, and we will mail out your books today. Thank you for being on.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and thank you, Ashley, and thank you all of us for joining us for this month's IWF Reads Book Club. We hope you enjoyed it. If you had feedback, we would love to hear it. So please send us a note either in the Facebook group or shoot us an email, info@iwf.org. But before we say our final goodbye, I want to quickly turn it over to Hadley, who's going to tell you a bit more about the organization we work for.
Sure. If you haven't done so, guys, please join our IWF Reads Book Club on Facebook. That's a great place to keep up with our books and events. You can just search Facebook for IWF Reads Book Club. I also noted that Victoria said earlier we had some new names, so I want to give just a 30-second introduction to Independent Women's Forum. We're the leading national women's organization dedicated to advancing policies that aren't just well-intended, but that actually enhance people's freedoms, choices, and well-being. We have an amazing staff. I'm our policy director. Ashley and Kelsey are also on staff with me, as is Victoria. We have just some amazing, very sharp women who are policy, communications, and legal minds from across the country. We do things like testify before Congress and state legislatures, produce educational materials and publications about various policy issues. We file amicus briefs in various court cases. You can find a lot of our work, those materials, those publications at iwf.org. And you can also sign up to receive news and updates about our events and goings on at IWF. Be sure to like us on social media as well, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. And with that, it's time for me to adjourn us today and to say goodbye. It's how quickly an hour goes when you're having fun. Thank you guys for joining us this Friday afternoon. We look forward to having you back at our next book club event. We hope you enjoyed this as much as we did. And now I guess it's time for a dance party to welcome the weekend. So we'll see you guys again soon.
I'm very
Bye, guys.
excited for July 31st. 3 p.m. We'll be reading Daughter of the Heartland by Senator Joni Ernst. See you then.